I'm Kelly.
And I'm Quinn.
And we're going to be talking to you about the Dream Daddy dating simulation game. Dream Daddy is a dating sim that prioritizes queer relationships and got a lot of attention in the video game world. But before we examine the queer characters in Dream Daddy, we're going to look at the dating sim genre as a whole. Dating simulation video games allow players to interact with dateable non-player characters, or NPCs, with progression tied to developing a relationship with one or more of these characters. They often contain a lot of dialogue, as you get to know the various characters, and in addition to choosing dialogue options, they may contain other gameplay elements like task management or minigames. There are many reasons to like dating sim games. The simplification and gamification of something as abstract, subjective, and personal as love and relationships is both interesting and satisfying to play. Romance is already a popular genre in television, film, and books, so the art, aesthetics, animation, interactivity, and music offered by the medium of video games provides a new and enticing way to experience romance stories, sometimes with you as the main character. Though romance is such a popular genre, people who play dating sim games are often characterized as creepy, lonely, or socially deviant in some way. Some dating sim games incorporate pornographic elements, which also creates stigma and alienates prospective audiences. Video games are already viewed by society as a lesser form of entertainment, and within this seemingly fringe hobby, dating sims are among the more misunderstood genres. Dating sims got their start in Japan in the mid-1980s and became more popular in the early 1990s. They can often be confused with visual novels, which also originated in Japan around the same time. Dating simulation games tend to prioritize in-game stats as metrics of progression, whereas visual novels usually require less input and strategy since the player just reads through a story and its accompanying visuals. The subcategories of dating sims are essentially divided by gender and degree of eroticism, and the original Japanese terms for these categories are still used in countries outside of Japan. These gender-binary focused genres of dating sim are bishoujo, where the main character is a man romancing women, and otome, where the main character is a woman romancing men. The characters in these early games and many of their predecessors are always cisgendered and always heterosexual. Traditional dating sims usually feature a bland main character, so the audience can project upon them. They usually don't have too many interests or personality traits other than wanting to date, and, like in this example, their faces and bodies are seldom or never shown on screen. Most of the personality goes into the romanceable NPCs, who usually fall into one of several categories: the childhood friend, the rebel, the athlete, the cheerful outgoing one, the shy or bookish one, and the emotionally distant one, to name a few. Other game genres like life simulation, action, adventure, and strategy often incorporate elements of dating simulation games because it adds intrigue to a story, deepens the player's connection to the characters, and provides another way to engage with the other mechanics of the game since there's usually some in-game benefit to romancing. Games in series like Fable, Skyrim, The Witcher, Dragon Age, Stardew Valley, Mass Effect, Persona, and Fire Emblem, to name a few, have been influenced by the dating sim genre and have in turn influenced the creation of new dating sim games. Since these games are not classified as dating sims explicitly, the dating elements within them are seen as more legitimate ways to experience romance stories than those found within traditional dating sims due to the stigma associated with them. Because of this, and indie developers venturing into dating sims, since they require fewer assets to make, dating sim developers have branched out from the standard heterosexual, cisgendered romance stories they started with and have begun to play with the conventions of the genre. Some games of note include Tax Heaven 3000, where a cute girl helps you fill out your federal income taxes, Doki Doki Literature Club, which looks like a dating sim but is actually a psychological horror game, Hatoful Boyfriend, where instead of handsome men, you are dating photorealistic birds, and I Love You Colonel Sanders, where you romance KFC's mascot. This brings us to queer dating sims. While queer characters in other games are few and far between, modern dating sims actually feature many more queer characters and often prioritize their stories in the game's narrative. The subcategories of queer stories in Japanese media are also still referred to with their original Japanese names. These include yaoi, which feature androgynous or feminine presenting gay men that pander to a female audience, bara, which features hypermasculine, plus-size, or hairy gay male characters in direct contrast to yaoi, and Yuri, which feature lesbian women with character tropes aligning with the female characters in straight dating sims that often pander to a male audience. Many people in the gaming community identify as queer, but queer representation in video games as a whole is significantly lacking from all types of games. In recent years, queer characters have begun appearing more in video games, and this trend is a positive sign that diverse queer stories are being prioritized in production. Dating sim games explore relationships and identity through gameplay, and when your sexuality or identity in real life has at times been vilified or illegal, exploring these concepts in a safe space, like a video game, can be a welcome respite to many queer players. Queer dating sims have flourished in recent years thanks to independent developers and sites like itch.io, which allow indie game creators to host and sell games, share assets, and foster fan communities. Dating sims tend to require fewer assets to create, making them cheaper overall, and because the genre has such established conventions and tropes, it makes them interesting to riff on and subvert. Since queer creators are also underrepresented in the video game industry as a whole, it's significant that indie developers are using dating sims as a medium to tell their stories and create their own forms of representation. So now let's take a look at one game which has some great queer representation, Dream Daddy. What it is, how it was created, and why it's such an important game in the dating sim world. Dream Daddy was developed and published by the YouTube Let's Play channel Game Grumps, hosted by Aaron Hansen and Dan Avidan. Originally started in 2012, Game Grumps has garnered a huge following in the past decade, sporting over 5.3 million subscribers and over 6.5 billion total video views. Both Hansen and Avidan lend their voices to the game, but were not part of the game's main development team, which included co-writers Leighton Gray and Vernon Shaw, director Tyler Hutchinson, and developer Jory Griffiths. According to the game's official website on Steam, Dream Daddy, a dad dating simulator, is a game where you play as a dad and your goal is to meet and romance other hot dads. You and your daughter have just moved to the sleepy seaside town of Maple Bay, only to discover that everyone in your neighborhood is a single, dateable dad. Released on July 20th, 2017, Dream Daddy was initially only available to play on Steam, but was further picked up by Linux in September of 2017, PS4 in October of 2018, and Nintendo Switch in July of 2019. Around a year after the release, Dream Daddy, a Director's Cut, was made available on Steam, Linux, and PS4 with new features, side quests, minigames, and previously cut content. The inspiration for Dream Daddy came from a joke that Shaw and Gray made about dads visiting Disneyland, and the idea of making it a dating simulator came from the aforementioned pigeon dating visual novel, Hatoful Boyfriend, which was released in 2014. It's significant to note that a subversive and silly dating sim like Hatoful Boyfriend inspired such a thoughtful and heartfelt dating sim like Dream Daddy. There were discussions amongst the developers that the game was too linear, so they altered it to more of a system-driven dating sim by researching the 1994 game Tokimeki Memorial, which was shown earlier in the video. As a result, the Dream Daddy team pivoted so that the narrative paths became more character-driven and logic-based as development went on. It became less about wooing the dads and more about establishing a connection based on their interests, further humanizing them. This direction goes against the traditional trope-based, one-dimensional characterization of early dating sims and creates a refreshing collection of interesting characters. They also changed the game's emphasis from sex to relationships. While sex-focused and pornographic elements are common in the dating sim genre, they made an intentional choice to not prioritize sex in Dream Daddy due to rampant sexualization of the queer community in media. However, the creators were worried about these characters' identities and homosexuality as a whole coming across in-game like a joke. They wanted it to be humorous by nature, but they wanted to do so in a way that didn't poke fun at anyone in the community. While creator Leighton Gray identifies as a queer woman, the rest of the creative team consisted of straight men, and therefore they continued to bring on consultants, specifically Will Weisenfeld and Felix Kramer, along with close friends to make sure that the game was serious and sincere. The development team put a lot of thought into how the characters refer to their sexual orientation, since most media concerning queer people focuses on societal issues of acceptance rather than Dream Daddy's focus on interpersonal relationships, social anxiety, and toxic masculinity. Furthermore, they wanted to normalize queer subjects and experiences rather than harping on them and placing their queerness at the forefront of their experiences and identities. Despite this, some fans have taken issue with the title of the game, specifically the use of the word daddy. Some see it as a nod to the kink community and its transformation into a meme, which they interpret as sexualizing gay men. However, since the game is literally focused on fathers, the title can also be seen as a tongue-in-cheek reference to both the sexualization of the word daddy and the abundance of dad jokes in the game.
Dream Daddy has no shortage of representation amongst its cast of characters. Beyond being a dating simulator surrounding men dating, these men have pre-existing relationships, some with other men and some with women. There is no coming out point for the dads, but we know that they're interested in the playable character, which means they could be gay, bisexual, or any other variety of identities. Each of the dads looks visually different in regards to race, ethnicity, and body type. And in one of Damien's interactions, it's confirmed that he's canonically transgender. Since Damien doesn't have a mentioned ex or deceased partner, it's even possible that he carried his son Lucien by himself. It is really unusual that queer men are depicted as dads, especially in a way that makes them more appealing or romanceable. Most dating simulators would have a mom character or two, generally a MILF and a young mom, but whenever dads are shown, they either hardly see their children, don't have custody, or their children are adults. Additionally, when dating simulators include a romanceable character with children, the audience never sees their children. In Dream Daddy, the children are an intentional part of this narrative and deeply loved by their fathers. Not only does the game have representation of queer dads, but it also has its fair share of dad jokes and puns that are sure to make a player chuckle, groan, or both. There's a specific style of humor attributed to fathers, and this game doubles down on it. While talking about representation and humor, there are occasionally raunchy jokes related to sex, but they are fairly tame compared to other games in the genre. The game has its moments, but it isn't explicitly sexual in imagery at any point, and the jokes are fairly mild. The playable character has he/him pronouns and can be customized with a number of different body types, each with an option for a binder to represent the character as trans. There are 28 different skin colors, which is significant since many character creators have fewer than 10 options. The hairstyles and facial features available are representative of a variety of ethnic backgrounds, and everything from piercings, to hair color, to body hair, to glasses, to the character's first and last name can be customized. There are even a few options for lips of unnatural colors, which are coded as lipsticks and normally not featured in male character creators. Amanda is your character's daughter. She's 18 and applying for colleges surrounding her interest in photography. While you cannot customize Amanda's appearance, she's a character of color, and you can choose if Amanda's other parent was a father or a mother, and if Amanda was born to you and your previous spouse or adopted, suggesting that adoption, in vitro fertilization, or pregnancy with the spouse are all legitimate options for representation. It's clear that a significant amount of care was put into just the character selection, which occurs within the first 5 minutes of the game. In considering the philosophy of the development team when creating the game, Wren and Shaw said that their goal was sincerity wrapped in cynicism, meaning the player would play the game because of the intrigue about gay dads, but walk away with life lessons about fatherhood and relationships. This tended to resonate strongly with fans, with one review saying, "I really like the inclusive nature of the game. The game is very pro-LGBT without impressing a message. If you're here just to date a cute dad, cool, but the game does provide representation that I haven't seen much in other games." Now we're going to discuss each of the dads, what they're like, if they fall into any established dating sim tropes, and the details of each of their endings.
Welcome! You've got dads!
We're going to begin with Brian, who acts as a rival in fatherhood to the playable character and has been described by fans as a bear with a dad bod. He has a pet corgi, Maxwell, and a 10-year-old daughter, Daisy. According to the creators, he was originally a conflict-free cinnamon roll, but they noted that his character felt lacking and there was no rival archetype, so the two were combined. While he is a rival, it's predominantly lighthearted banter. Compared to the other characters, he doesn't have internal conflict, so he keeps a degree of conflict-free meets campy rival. One of the ways to meet him is at the park when he throws a frisbee at your head, and your responses vary, but some options include, "Well, traditionally you're not supposed to aim for people's heads," or, "I'll catch it with my teeth next time." In my opinion, this shows some of the relationship dynamic, which is centered around flirty banter, light teasing, and one-upping. In Brian's bad ending, he judges the party you've thrown for your daughter, and you remain rivals with intentional distance in your relationship. This rivalry is less lighthearted with more distaste for one another. In Brian's good ending, you no longer identify as rivals, and the competitive nature of one-upping changes to more of a compliment competition, where you both build one another up. I personally appreciate this shift because it maintains the dynamic between you while also shifting towards a closer relationship built on romantic love.
What an amazing date!
Next, I'm going to talk about Hugo, who's an English teacher at Amanda's school, fulfilling the hot professor archetype. He teaches middle school and high school due to budget cuts and writes scholarly articles on 18th century literature. He has a son named Ernest, who's mentioned in Hugo's dad book with the wording, "If you're on here to tell me that my son put a cherry bomb in your trash, I know, and I'm sorry." Unlike some of the other dads, Hugo's ex-husband is still alive, with Hugo having primary custody, and Ernest considers the ex to be the fun dad. Hugo's nerdy but endearing, with a secret interest in wrestling, including his own wrestling persona, J.D. Slaminger, whose costume would be a tweed coat and his finishing move would be a catcher in the eye, in which he pokes his opponent's eyes out and calls them a phony. Regardless of the ending you get, Hugo's interest in wrestling is exposed to his students. In his bad ending, his students don't judge his interest in wrestling, but he still feels insecure over the interest. You want to be open with what you like, so you share your romantic feelings for him. He's flattered, but not interested, and you stay friends. In his good ending, he comes to Amanda's graduation party in a wrestling t-shirt. He tells you that he's embraced his interest entirely, publicly, all thanks to you, and it's turned out well, with Craig, another one of the dads, engaging in a mutual discussion about wrestling with him. He says that he feels more like himself than ever.
Looks like Paradise Lost just got found.
The next dad I'm going to talk about is Matt, who's the cool dad, and he owns a local coffee shop where the menu items are themed on musicians. Matt's own first and last name come from the musicians in the band The Front Bottoms. He has a daughter named Carmencita, and he likes coffee brewing, record shopping, and live concerts. He also acts as a father figure to Pablo, a local music merch seller he's hired to work at his cafe, who has an absent father. Matt struggles with anxiety, and this is shown through his dialogue where he rambles anytime he's uncomfortable, which is often. Despite this, with his now deceased wife's support, he was able to tour with a band before settling in Maple Bay. Now that she's gone and he doesn't have her support, he's abandoned sharing his music entirely. Despite his anxiety, he does manage to have a few close friends. This includes the Canadian band Pup and Molly, a record store worker. Matt's bad ending is fairly direct. He just tells you he isn't interested in anything outside of a friendship. In Matt's good ending, he tells you that he's happier than he's been in a long time. He mentions that he's going to be recording music again and even offers to share it with you, which is a huge deal for him. All of this comes from a place of having genuine love and connection in his life.
You know what? I'm down for an encore.
That brings us to our goth dad, Damien, who has an interest in the Victorian era. He's a vegetarian trans man who works in IT and volunteers at an animal shelter with Joseph's wife, Mary, who he's close friends with. Many fans theorize that he and Mary are related based on their eye color and the fact that she canonically dyes her hair. He has a teenage son named Lucien, who is described in-game as a discount Gerard Way. One of the ways the player can meet him is at a store called Dead Goth and Beyond, where he's arguing with the cashier about the differences between the Edwardian and Victorian eras. His relationship with the player is aligned with courting, including written letters, garden walks, and asking permission to kiss you. In the extended cut, there's a possibility that Hugo and Damien end up as a couple. In Damien's bad ending, he rescinds his courtship, but you remain friends. Damien's good ending feels so impactful. As a trans man, there's an importance to him over his appearance and the way he presents himself. His normal attire requires a lot of effort between the colored contacts, styled hair, and Victorian attire, which consists of multiple warm layers. Due to his connection and love for the player character, he finally feels comfortable enough to show up to Amanda's graduation party in his IT clothes with glasses, no colored contacts, and his hair up. Damien says that he feels comfortable presenting as this version of himself now too, a version that's just as real and valid. Additionally, he kisses the player, despite how PDA was scandalous in the Victorian era.
Are you familiar with the works of Corey Feldman? He simply slayed in The Lost Boys.
That brings us to Craig, who's a gym rat and the player's former college roommate. He has a set of twins and a baby and is divorced from his wife. His college nickname was Kegstand Craig, and he and the playable character got into a lot of antics in college. Like when Craig smuggled a puppy into the dorm, and he and the playable character made up a third fake roommate named Carl, whose cock sounded like a dog's bark. All that to say, the playable character and Craig have a history and align with the best friends trope. Despite Craig's silly college antics and gym bro persona, he takes work very seriously and doesn't know how to take a break to take care of himself. His relationship dynamic with the player is very bro-coded, and Craig originally seems unaware of your advances. Your dates are themed around fitness. In Craig's bad ending, he's antsy about returning home to do work because he already spent too much time at Amanda's party. When the player character shows concern toward him and his inability to take a break, he brushes the concern off but calls you a good friend. When you ask if he wants more than a good friend, he says that he doesn't have the time for a romantic relationship right now and you're better off as friends. In Craig's good ending, he's finally able to take a break from pushing himself too hard. He's listened to you and your advice, and, while it's difficult, he knows he has your support as an accountability partner to keep his priorities in check. Despite a lot of best friend inside jokes and the overuse of the word bro, this ending does result in a kiss and implications of a romantic future together, which goes against the trope of two men who are just bros while being blatantly romantic but supposedly not interested.
Wow, that was an amazing date.
That brings us to Joseph, who fits into the guy next door trope. His dad book profile says he was voted Maple Bay's #1 youth minister for 5 years running. He lives in his hometown with his beautiful wife and 4 amazing kids. If he's not at church, he's out on the open water setting sails on the seas of adventure. He loves playing guitar and crushing his kids at Candyland. It paints a very clear picture of a good man, but he still openly flirts with you. Despite his externally perfect life, his wife Mary seems to be neglectful toward their children and hostile to him. She says Joseph is better at pretending to be happy in the marriage than she is. Mary spends a lot of her time intoxicated, hanging around other men, like Robert, one of the other dads, but she has never cheated, unlike her husband, who coincidentally cheated on her with Robert. Joseph, unlike the other dads, has 3 possible endings, although one isn't canonical to the game and is impossible to get unless you are intentionally looking for it. The non-canon ending is referred to as the cult ending by most fans. It was a potential route the game could have gone, due to the game creators' love of horror. In this ending, Joseph admits responsibility for the tragedy, divorce and spousal death, of the other dads in Maple Bay as a means of offering sacrifice to his god. After a confrontation with the playable character and Mary, Joseph goes missing with an elaborate cover-up story. The detective on the case, Saul, hints that his own wife vanished, a nod that Joseph and the cult were responsible, and he's a single father. There are implications of a potential future relationship between him and the player character. While this ending is interesting, it would change the dynamic of the game entirely. The important ending would be this one, and it would align as a disguised horror dating game instead of something true to the genre. The other messages of the game would be overshadowed by discussions of the cult, and the representation would suffer as a result. In the bad ending, Joseph wants to continue an affair with the player, but has no intentions to leave Mary because he insists that their relationship is important to the churchgoers and his children. In the good ending, Joseph reconciles with Mary and intends to work on their marriage. He puts an end to the romance between the two of you. Joseph's canon endings are extremely important. There's no scenario where this cheating man leaves his wife. The bad ending centers around him continuing to sleep around with you, with the knowledge there's no commitment and no future between you. In the good ending, he does right by his wife and ends it with you, which largely challenges genre conventions about good and bad endings, which directly relate to whether you get the love interest or not.
Oh, what time is it? That was great.
That leads us to our last dad, Robert, the bad boy archetype of the game. He's a cryptid lover and regular whiskey drinker who's estranged from his adult daughter, Val. He's avoidant toward serious conversations and prefers to tell intentionally fake and shocking stories to get a reaction. He has an immense distaste for Joseph, stemming from his personal past history that likely colored how he views romantic relationships. Joseph describes their history as a one-night stand, but pictures from his boat insinuate otherwise. Despite this, Robert is good friends with Joseph's wife, Mary. With Robert, doing what you think he wants will never go over well. He prefers harsh truth, banter, and genuine interest over fawning and sex, despite what he might lead you to believe. On the player character's first night in Maple Bay, you have the opportunity to have a one-night stand with Robert. Doing so will ensure that you get a bad ending with Robert no matter what. In his bad ending, he's been ghosting you and is distant when you approach him. When you ask about his daughter, he brushes you off by saying that he and his dad don't talk and not everyone has to see eye to eye. When you respond poorly to this, Robert retorts, "It's funny how you were able to look past this when you were getting laid." In Robert's good ending, his daughter Val comes to Amanda's graduation party. She tells you that their relationship is slowly repairing and it'll take a while to be fully healed. She says her dad is clearly doing a lot better and taking care of himself, and adds how much he clearly likes you. When you approach Robert, he tells you that he showered today and is intentionally fighting his own vices and his own self-destructiveness daily. He thanks you for talking some sense into him. Robert tells you that he really likes you, but he has emotional growth to do before he can be in a relationship, and you deserve better than who he is now. What he really needs is friendship, and the playable character is more than happy to give it to him. Before anyone knew about the endings, Robert was a massive fan favorite, with many players thinking, I can fix him. Robert fans were excited to jumpstart his growth and fall in love. While this ending might not be satisfying for players intending to get the man, it's honest. Val and Robert will need time. People do need to grow for themselves sometimes outside of the context of a romantic relationship. This ending manages to be both heartwarming and refreshing.
Uh-oh, where'd my pants go?
Dream Daddy's 3-date structure offers a replayable experience that encourages players to try out each path. Overall, the characters fall into some established tropes and archetypes, but by playing the game, you can see that they were intentionally written that way to challenge those conventions and complicate these characters into flawed, interesting people. Game Grumps was already helping to popularize dating simulation games before Dream Daddy through the various Let's Play series they posted on their channel, including Doki Doki Literature Club, Hatoful Boyfriend, and this one called Kitty Love.
Is this a cat dating game?
And what if it is, Dan?
I mean...
Since they already had a sizable audience when the game came out, the main marketing tactic they employed was posting about Dream Daddy on Game Grumps socials and having other notable YouTube creators and Let's Players share videos of their gameplay and honest reviews to further generate interest. Channels like Markiplier, Dan and Phil, and Jacksepticeye garnered millions of views on their playthroughs of Dream Daddy. It was even nominated for a number of awards in categories like Game of the Year and Best Cast of Characters. Most dating sims never received sequels or additional downloadable content, but in addition to releasing the Dad Rector's Cut expansion, they also released Dream Daddy, a dad dating comic book, a year after the game first launched. The comic series tells 5 standalone stories, each focused on a different dad, their kids, and their relationships with one another. Written by co-creators Leighton Gray and Vernon Shaw, each issue is illustrated by a different artist and features 18 to 23 pages of full-color art and story. The releases of both the DLC and the comic books suggest that fans were still enjoying the game and that it was still bringing in new players a year after release. It's worth mentioning that fan communities have had an incredible impact on the modern dating sim landscape. Discord, Twitch, social media, itch.io, and other fan communities have people providing input, playtesting, and buying all kinds of experimental dating sims that are diversifying the genre and broadening audiences. The cosplay community has fully embraced Dream Daddy, which is another hobby that's become much more diverse and popular over the years. In the past few years since Dream Daddy has come out, we've seen dozens of dating sims and visual novel games that are continuing to creatively challenge the norms of the genre and tell bold, diverse stories with empathy and heart. Sometimes they are multiplayer games where you compete against your friends to romance an NPC. Other times they are randomly generated dungeon crawlers where your sweetheart can turn into a scythe. They are sci-fi, they are realistic, they are supernatural, and everything in between. Relationships are inherently messy and difficult to predict. The dating sim genre attempts to simplify real-world relationships by gamifying them and creating a set number of endings. But as we know in real life, there are infinite possibilities to explore in human relationships. Dating sims are often overlooked as important mediums for representation and storytelling, but Dream Daddy defies this stereotype and represents its queer characters with nuance, humor, and sensitivity. The future of queer dating sims is bright, and thankfully there are more creators than ever before who are putting their unique visions into the world.
Dream